Good morning, everybody, or at least morning in Oslo, where I'm based, maybe a different time of the day in your part of the world. My name is Melanie Somerville. I am a tenure-track postdoctoral fellow in the Department of International Environment and Development Studies at the Norwegian University of Life Sciences, or NMBU is our Norwegian acronym. And I am not actually the official chair. I'm one of the conveners, a large group of conveners for this session. But unfortunately, our chair, Kobi Ngubani, is struggling to log in. So he will hopefully be able to join us at some point, at which point we can maybe give him a few minutes to speak. But oh, he's here now. Oh, here he is. Okay, so okay. Kobi, yeah, maybe you can take over.
Good, yeah, all right.
Okay. So here, Kobi, do you wanna take over for me? And just oh yeah, you look like you've unmuted yourself. Yeah. Oh, we can't hear you.
Maybe there's no audio from Mobi, yeah.
Yeah. Huh. Oh no, technical issues.
Yeah. Maybe you can type in the text or something, but I think Melanie, you can.
Yeah, okay, well, yeah, maybe I'll just keep going. I mean, Kobi, you might even need to, I know you had problems logging in, but you might even need to.
You said keep sharing, yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that you might need to even sort of log out and log back in or something, or yeah. Okay, so this session is on counter agrarian reform, dynamics of accumulate in the global south, dynamics and accumulation of change. I think I've just mixed up that title a little bit, but anyways, bear with me since I've sort of been thrust into this chairing role. And I think what we're going to do here is to follow the, what the organizers have suggested, which is to each of the participants or sort of panelists, session members, can give a 2 or 3 minute summary of their presentation and their main point. And ideally, we'll also pose a discussion question that we could that could help to sort of focus our discussion over the next 40 minutes. And we'll do all 4 of them and sort of hold questions or discussion points until the end, because hopefully there will be some interesting discussion between the participants and the papers as well. And if you would like to raise a question, or if you would like to make a comment or raise a question, there are 2 ways of doing that. One is to type it into the chat pane, and one is to use the raise hand feature in Zoom. And I will try to just keep an eye on sort of the audience or the participants and call on you by name. And it is bear in mind that the session is being recorded. So if you're not comfortable, having your voice recorded or whatever, then it's probably better to use the chat pane if you would still like to raise a question or a comment. I have a noisy 5-month-old, sometimes noisy 5-month-old sitting beside me. So please forgive me if you can hear some small noises in the background, and you may see me pick him up, etc. But yeah. So why don't we go in the order that I guess one other thing is that I know Enrique, who was our first sort of presenter, I guess, in this session, was also had a competing, he has a competing appointment and he wasn't sure whether he would be able to join. So we're gonna skip him and instead go straight to Luna. And then from Luna to George, and then to Trevor if he's here. So yeah, so maybe why don't you start us off, Luna, with a quick summary and any discussion question you would like us to contemplate.
Thank you, Melanie. And so so let me start. I would not represent the paper, the presentation, because it's already uploaded in the system a while ago, but I will start first with quickly. So my name is Bảo Nguyệt Đặng from Vietnam. I'm a PhD candidate at the International Institute of International Institutes of Social Studies, we call ISS. So of the Netherlands, but at the moment I'm based in Vietnam after the COVID. My paper is discussing the counter effect of land reform okay. So my papers is on counter effects of land reform, a view from below, based on a case studies of access to land of rural farming household in a mountainous province in the northern part of Vietnam. So the entry points of my research is starting from a common argumentation among Vietnam scholars that argue that or suggest that land reform in Vietnam has resulted in a rather equitable or equal distribution of land among tillers in the past. So this is an entry point where I realized that in the fieldwork, in the research sites where I conduct my fieldwork for my PhD, the reality is different. So just to say that the paper presenting in these panels is a part of my PhD dissertation. So I will not go back to the key finding, but I see that there are two important points that I would contribute to the discussion. So first of all, I argue that the land reforms in Vietnam, particularly the results of land reform in Vietnam, has been taken for granted by Vietnam scholar because in the literature it hardly discussed how the process has been implemented. Rather, but I guess it's a part of the lack of data, and also during the past, where the research on the issues has been very difficult to be conducted. So probably that the result. But land reform in Vietnam, led by Vietnamese government, has not significantly reconfigured or changed land tenure relation across different groups of rural farming household, as it was hoping. And importantly, it has been inevitably, it has been a political process. However, this process has not been considered, and particularly the political aspect of the process has not been considered significantly by the Vietnamese government when conducting different ways of land reform. So at the very beginning, in Vietnam, different ways of land reform has been conducted. The first ways happened during the independent periods, starting from the 1945 to 1954 and 1956. So I said the land reform program has not taken into account power relation across different groups of rural farming household and ethnicities. In later phase, the program has legitimized the unequal access to land situation that already exists between different actors at the grassroots level. And at the early phase, the differentiation in access to land in my research village has been rather the result of demographic and cyclical differentiation, as is argued by Chayanov in Thorne 1988. In the research village, land quality has played, the second point of my contribution is that in the research village, land quality has played an important role in determining the ability to benefit from having access to land between different socioeconomic groups of rural farming household and ethnicities. More specifically, the poorest group of farming household can physically own a larger areas of land compared with the middle and the richer group. However, the ability to be benefited from the land was constrained by the quality of the land they own. Land land degradations due to monoculture farming has increased investment cost and constrained the capital poor to invest in farming expansion. And as a result, a household that have capital poor could not expand and could not invest further on the land area that they own, and therefore they cannot alone, like having access to land cannot alone satisfy their production and reproduction need. And many of the research family that report that they have to change and then they have to take on wage work elsewhere. But in my presentation, I do not focus on this part. So that's the fighting, and for this reason, I would suggest that why in the discussion in the literature we discuss the prioritization by dispossession. So we focus on like having access to land from a very physical perspective, like a physical land transfer. But then it did not, but the fact that the ability to benefit from land really affect the household ability to, so technically they own the land, but they do not really have the benefit from it enough for them to survive. So in this case, I would suggest a term that we need to look at it more like now it become a process of proletarianization without dispossession. So they are there, but they are not able to live on the land that they have. And the later is closely related to land degradation, but only reveal itself when we employ a view of access to land and the ability to be benefit from land to investigate the proletarianization process. So just to conclude that, again, I argue that the results of the Vietnam land reform in the literature has been taken for granted. It is a political process, and historically, how it have done in the past significantly shaped the access to land situation in my research site. And I suggest that the critical view of the results of land reform in Vietnam, therefore, should really ask different questions, for instance, how process has been implemented, how it has changed land distribution, how it has changed or unchanged the land tenure relation across different socio-economic groups, and to whom the process has been benefit more than others. So those are the key point of my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Luna. So from Luna, let's go to George. And I think our chair has managed to rejoin us. So after you, George, maybe we'll give Kobe a chance to see if we can actually hear him now. But let's proceed with your presentation first.
Oh, thanks, Chair Melan. Am I audible? Oh, thanks. So the title of my research is For the Land, by the Land, Counter-Agrarian Reform in Post-Land Reform Zimbabwe. So what happens is that what happened actually is Zimbabwe implemented a radical land reform in the early 2000s. So this was one of the most, recognized the radical land reforms post the Cold War period. So the purpose of my research is to show the limitations of radical land reform or limitations of a broad land reform, especially under neoliberalism. So what we then see is that the beneficiaries of the land reform, Black peasants, are now renting out the land to the former landowners, one. To also see the state repossessing the land from the Black beneficiaries using other means, which I call virtual dispossession, such as joint ventures, etc. Then we also see some political dynamics. For example, the last president Mugabe was moved from power. Then the new government is removing some former ministers from the land. So all these point to some counter-agrarian reform. But what we then see is that we see in this kind of counter-agrarian reform, we see one, the centralization of land again, and the commodification of land, intensive commodification of land. But what we then see is what I think comes from Michael Levin is regimes of dispossession. We see a new wave of dispossession of the people, but this is like what Nguye says, it's more of a dispossession in situ. These people are not taken away from the land. They still remain on the land, but not all of them are then absorbed into the labor class because, capitalist agriculture cannot absorb. But this is all happening at the, with the approval of the state, because what I think is the Zimbabwean state is at a crossroads with regards to the development question. They don't know whether to go the peasant way or the commercial way. So basically, that's my work and the colleague Sandra Batasar. So our work shows the limitations of a large-scale land reform under neoliberalism. And more importantly, it shows the enduring nature of the land question in former settler colonies, that in a former settler colony, you can implement a land reform, but it's always contested, whether from below or from above. From below, it's contested by leasing out to other landed households, but more specifically, it's more contested from above, especially from former landowners and from the state. So eventually, what we then see, we see some contest to this land concentration. There's contest from the poor people, and there's also contest from other sections of the society. But more importantly, the work also revisits the work of Kaukaus on the necessity of smallholder farmers to capitalist expansion. We see then here and there, whilst they are not fully absorbed into the labor class, we see a continuation of the smallholder farmers as sites of, labor production sites for the capitalist farmers. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, George. Minkobi, do you want to unmute yourself and see if we can hear you?
Am I audible?
Oh, there we are. Excellent. So why don't I pass over chairing to you if you're comfortable with, if you're comfortable with that. Since you missed the very beginning, I didn't say anything yet about our special issue ambitions. So that might be a relevant point for you to comment on, and also just to alert people to the fact that we have a second panel immediately after this one. So thanks everybody for bearing with us through the technical challenges.
Yeah, thank you so much, Melanie. We have two panels for this counter-agrarian reform initiative of ours, and we had been meeting for about 2 years now, and we have a proposal for a special issue, and we are inviting colleagues to contribute, especially after listening to our presentations. Unfortunately, some of our presenters are struggling to log in, as I had struggled. But just to elaborate on the context, as we know, land redistribution was essentially a Marxist ideology, but now it appears to be captured by neoliberal reformist ideology, and that actually dilutes the original idea of redistributing land in a socialist way. And what we see now are counter-agrarian reform tendencies, as our colleagues have been describing, that occur in various regions. So counter-agrarian reform constitutes the elements of political and economic behavior that constitutes countercurrents against sweeping redistribution of land. And I have further remarks to make, especially since my colleagues are still struggling. Some are sending reports now to me on WhatsApp. They are trying to log in. Maybe it's our internet here in Southern Africa. I don't know what's going on, but I'll just make these short remarks. So how can land reform lead to inequality can be explained by gauging the economic behaviors of those allocated land attached to the historical class formation trajectories prior and subsequent to improved access to land through land reform. And those who are allocated land exist in a capitalist mode of production and may aspire to be capitalist farmers proper, big or small, on the basis of hired labor or self-exploitation. This can lead to counter-agrarian tendencies as land concentrates in the hands of the few within neoliberal frameworks of austerity and drastically reduced state agricultural subsidies. Enrique's paper and Baodang's paper speak to these dynamics, as well as George's paper and Melanie's paper. Actually, most, if not all, contributors speak to these dynamics. And this brings, as George was elaborating, this brings us to another phenomenon of counter-agrarian reform, that of reverse rentals, as we discussed in this conference in 2021. This panel today builds upon that engagement with additional inputs and refined thoughts. For example, Trevor Ngwane, who's still trying to log in, emphasizes on racialized capitalism at the core of the inherent tendency of capital to seize control of land in much of the global south in well-orchestrated ways, similar to colonial land confiscations. We also deal in various ways with class formation tendencies attached to counter-agrarian reform, particularly the impacts on marginalized classes. For example, the impoverished landed property attached to processes of what Melanie Somerville calls agrarian repair strategies of those who want to maintain control of the land. So let us open up to discussion. I will take a few hands. Okay, maybe you, Melanie, and your son there can lead us with some remarks. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Well, I guess, I mean, it's in some ways some of the questions that, so I'll present briefly in the next session that runs immediately after this one. But some of the questions that I posed in my presentation, at the end of my presentation, apply very much to this panel as well. And the two that I particularly highlighted was, one, what are the sort of key drivers of counter-agrarian reform, and what mechanisms might be used to interrupt it, conversely, or prevent it, ideally, to make sure that land reform effectively holds to its reparative ambitions or its redistributive ambitions. And then the other question that I posed is, what are the kind of similarities and differences across these cases? And I think that you've already spoken a little bit to that in your sort of introductory remarks, Nkobi, but that might be something that our different session participants would like to respond to, those two questions. What do they see as sort of the key drivers of this, and what are the similarities and differences they can spot between their work and that of others who are participating in this panel or the next panel?
All right, thank you so much, Melanie. Anyone else with questions, remarks? What we are beginning to see here is that this is unfolding in different regions that had land reforms in the recent past, in Latin America, in Southern Africa, and in some parts of East Asia. And so essentially what we are trying to do is to coalesce and move towards a general special issue. Currently, we have 8 contributions, and mostly are concentrated in Southern Africa. So if there's anyone else working in other parts of the world who has seen these dynamics or can draw from the work of others, you are more than welcome to contribute. But more specifically, colleagues may have questions, direct questions to the speakers.
Luna, is that a raised hand? Yeah, okay, there we go. She's just, yeah.
Yeah, because I couldn't find where the
Yeah.
raising hand function on Zoom. But anyway, I wonder, no, I have a question actually, because I hear the question raised by Melania. I wonder, should we have this kind of like an open conversation, or like, should we really stimulate this kind of open conversation where everybody can share their view, or what? Or like we wait for our turn to answer the question?
I'm open to either possibility. I mean, I'm happy if people want to jump in. I think everybody here, would be keen for that. I mean, the reality is we have only another 10 minutes in this session before we move to the next session, so we don't have tons of time. That's one of the challenges, I think, of this format. But yeah, I mean, if people want to jump in, maybe I can. Okay, and our volunteer needs to leave soon, but that's okay. I will take over as host. So maybe I will just throw another question into the hopper, because it's one that I spend a lot of time thinking about. It is, and that's when we say sort of counter agrarian reform, and we say that means instances where the gains of sort of redistributive land reform were reversed. But what gains exactly were we anticipating? Or like when we say if this is something where the aims of land reform are reversed, and what aims were we anticipating? And that sounds kind of like a facetious question, but I think it's really important to clarify that in our minds, actually. Like, is it that we expected redistribution and it didn't work out? Is it that we expected some kind of redress of history and that wasn't delivered somehow, or it fell short? Or yeah, so what exactly is being countered, I guess, in a sense.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Maybe Luna, would you like to respond?
Well, I actually have the same question like Melania raised, because I really clearly see that even within one country, the view of what does it mean land reforms, and then the reason, or so for my own case, I see that the result of the reform is influenced a lot by the, for instance, race, ethnicity here, different way of life, different way of working on the land, and also how their view of the land in their own, because in Vietnam, in the northern part, self-subsistence still play very important roles in rural household livelihood. So for that reason, if we can, within Vietnam, if we compare the result of land reform in the lowland area with the northern part, is totally different. And at the same time, I realize that in the country in Vietnam, land reform has been triggered by as a kind of like how to say political propaganda. for the leading for the party to get support. So in that case, the process had totally overlooked the internal politics of the rural community, and that's exactly why it's introduced or it's induced very different. Even in this case, what I see as a counter is that because it doesn't change the power relationship between different groups, so the effects of land reform, instead of creating like an equal contribution, it actually reinforced the existing inequality in the area already. And this is exactly what has been missing in the discussion of land reform in Vietnam.
Yeah.
So that's why, really,
Yeah, I was really struck at watching your presentation, Luna, about that there is this real sort of assumption that it has yielded some kind of equality, right? And in fact, that it hasn't, right? So maybe that's one of the things that collectively we hope that agrarian reform will actually deliver, is more equality between groups, including on the basis of ethnicity, as you point out, et cetera. And I think that really, I mean, you guys will hear a bit more about my work in the next panel, but or those who stick around, but I think that certainly articulates well with what I'm seeing, you know, that there's an element of sort of redress or a hope for more equality for groups that have historically been colonized and racialized in both Canada and South Africa, where my research is based. So yeah. What about you, George? Might you have any comments on that, or what do you think, like what, you know, what was the ambition that's being compromised here?
I think with regards to Zimbabwe's issue, there were several reasons to do the land reform. Some of them were to address the racial inequalities, and some of them were, of course, to make sure that the Black people can do something to reduce poverty. So, because, you know, probably 60% of the people live in the countryside, and the fact that these same people who were supposed to benefit from the land are now losing it, then it means, you know, probably those racial inequalities are coming back, depending on the people who are centralizing the land. So that's how the counter agrarian, it comes in for me on two fronts. The first front is that these people cannot access the land anymore. They are now being turned into a labor class, which was there before. And number two, of course, those racial inequalities, they are creeping in. That's, yeah. Then, of course, the key drivers are very diverse, but basically the essence of the land reform is being undermined. Yeah.
We have a comment from Janet Cherry, and another hand. Janet is saying that it will be interesting to compare what is happening in India regarding proletarianization and struggles over land. And
we're getting some interference from someone.
So
yeah,
I think it's nice to. Oh my god! What happened? My microphone was on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. There's another hand up, but it's unclear on my side.
Yeah, it's Sandra.
Melanie,
Yeah.
could you please assist?
Yeah, Sandra. Sandra, do you want to add your comment as well? Yeah, or question? You might have to unmute yourself if you have not done that yet. Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah. So this is Sandra.
Yeah.
I'm co-authoring the article with George.
Oh, great.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think my reaction is in response to what is being countered.
Yeah.
Zimbabwe is quite a complex case. So you realize that we can talk about, you know, this aspect in terms of, you know, counter agrarian, what is being countered from several fronts. For instance, we realize that the state is actually, you know, countering peasant notions of accumulation, because for them, it doesn't really meet neoliberal standards. And another aspect is also, this land being used to counter, political elements and so-called adversaries, where you see, this connection between, factionalism within the ruling party and those who are outside since the regime change in 2017. But also, what is also important is the counter-agrarian, tendencies that are happening in terms of the meaning of land. Smallholder farmers and peasants, and what land means to them. For instance, land tied to issues of spirituality, issues of identity, but the state sees land only in terms of productivity.
Yeah.
And this productivity is defined in certain ways, like, for instance, they are demanding that you have to grow maize. So right now, they are having audits in the new resettlement areas, A1 farms. You have to grow maize, because for them, that is important in terms of what they are defining as productivity. But we also see other counter tendencies related to issues of gender and intersectionality, where, for instance, young people and women are being displaced to pave way for large-scale land investments, which are considered, to be meeting the standards of, the neoliberal trajectory that the country has assumed since 2017. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I think you've made some excellent points, Sandra, and I think a really good reminder to all of us to keep kind of a more holistic perspective as well, and not lose sight of things like the way that the meaning of land is being countered, et cetera, and not sort of just adopt, in a sense, the productivity lens that national governments or central states often do adopt, We are nearly at the end of our time, I think, Nkobi. So should we, should we maybe wrap up? Because unfortunately, well, fortunately or unfortunately, even if you want to stay for the next panel, we all have to log off and link up on the new link. So.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone. I see Ogeto from Ethiopia. Maybe you may want to join us in the next panel and maybe reflect on Ethiopia. And that's an invitation to everyone to join us in the next panel.
Yeah, please do join us. We hope to see you momentarily at another link. Okay.
Yeah. Please remember to log off from this link and then join panel 21B.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, bye everyone. Thanks. See you soon, I hope.
See you there.
Yes.